I'm about to do something extremely stupid that is ill-advised for any rational person watching this video. It's about that time of year when Halloween is just around the corner, which means a lot for movies in general. You can feel it when this time of year rolls around, and it's fairly certain. A chill sets in the air, the leaves start to turn a gorgeous shade of orange, red, and brown, and there are a plethora of horror movies readily available to get you into the spirit of the season, with supernatural offerings involving monsters such as vampires, werewolves, zombies, and even ghosts. As a film critic, I am often asked about which movies I would recommend during this time of year, and I often have an extensive list that I give to people of movies I'd easily choose as required viewing for this season. Yet this Halloween, I want to do something a little bit different than usual in order to get into the spirit of the season. If you've clicked on this video, you've no doubt already seen the title and thumbnail of this ridiculous exercise I'm about to partake in. So let me explain to you how the idea for this video came about. I was at my local Barnes & Noble a few weeks ago, carefully browsing not within the books, but in the extensive Criterion Collection section for those coveted Blu-rays that we all track down as cinephiles. After striking gold with my selections, I carefully made my way up to the checkout in order to make my purchase, and as I was standing there waiting to check out, I happened to look over at a nearby book display only to find a quite vague and no doubt influential book cover staring me in the face, which was simply a pair of pale hands holding an apple with the one-word title written in advanced script above it, Twilight. Now, unless you lived under a rock your entire lifetime, it's hard not to know what Twilight is, especially from a sarcastic point of view, to put it lightly. Everyone knows that it's the series where a deranged human girl falls in love with a teen heartthrob vampire. Much has been said about its cinematic impact, and even more has been said about how cringeworthy some of the phenomena surrounding this property has been the last decade alone. Now, although I grew up with two sisters, I am pleased to report that neither of them were ever into the Twilight craze in general, which probably explains my lack of extensive context in this regard. However, looking at this book cover in my local Barnes & Noble, I began to realize something in that moment, which was, this series had been adapted to film properties, and I had never seen a single one of these movies before. As such, I began to ponder contemplatively what my personal reaction would be to what has been shamelessly termed as cinematic fanfiction of the highest order. As a grizzled film critic, would I be able to appreciate, well, anything really about this franchise? As someone unfamiliar and not knowledgeable about literally anything relating to this franchise, would I be able to really connect or feel for the characters or the plot? And as someone well outside of the target demographic for this series, would I even care about it? With all of these burning questions in my mind and the thought of fall and Halloween right around the corner, I made the definitive decision that for the first time in my 20 years of existence, I would finally get through all the Twilight films. However, I was not going to do it in just any specific fashion. Rather, I want to take a more creative approach to such an undertaking. And as a result of my stupidity, as you can clearly tell from the title of this video alone, I have decided to watch all 5 of the Twilight movies in 24 hours. I cannot believe I'm even saying that out loud. Now, let's be honest with ourselves here, these movies aren't critically lauded, for lack of a better word. They've garnered cult classic status to be sure, but you don't exactly see many, read that, any Oscars attached to these films in general. As a result, I'm approaching this experience with an open mind, but I'm also extremely hesitant and also downright expecting nothing noteworthy in particular. As for particular thoughts or expectations as I prepare to partake in this endeavor, I've really got nothing. I don't think the reality of this situation is fully set in for what I'm about to witness or do. Like, yeah, I'm sure that small doses of the Twilight franchise are fine here and there. Kind of like when you go get x-rays at like a dentist and they do it like every few months. But I'm really not sure if the human mind was built to withstand 5 straight back-to-back experiences such as this within one 24-hour period. This might literally be the first cinematic experience to make me question my sanity. And such a thought genuinely concerns and terrifies me. Yet at least you'll be able to join me as I sink lower and lower into a psychological spiral from this series. With that said, before I begin this challenge, if you like this video and want to see other movie-related analysis and content like this, don't forget to click that subscribe button and like the video down below. A lot of planning and pieces of my sanity will no doubt go into such a video, and I really appreciate every ounce of support I receive, and thank you guys in advance. Speaking of planning, I've managed to coordinate a facsimile of a schedule for my day in regards to how I'm going to fit 5 of these movies into a 24-hour period. Kind of calculating and accounting for the runtimes of each movie, it's going to take me around 11 hours, give or take, to watch all of these movies, not accounting for physical and mental breaks in between, which I'm sure I'll need at some point within this process. 11 hours of content about a cringeworthy vampire emo kid and his human girlfriend. I can't wait. All right, everyone, good morning. I'm up bright and early as it's currently 6:53 in the morning, and today is the day where I jump headfirst into the exciting world of Twilight. I cannot wait. The reality of my current situation has finally set in, and It's not a fun experience to reflect on, really. The fact that I'm starting my day off not knowing basically anything about this series and will finish today having experienced everything relating to this ridiculous property is nothing short of sobering. Yet I'm ultimately holding out hope at the end of the day for one of two different outcomes. On the one hand, I might legitimately enjoy this somehow and find some artistic and thematic merit that makes me like my time with this franchise overall. On the other hand, this movie might be so bad that I have just a blast laughing at my misfortune. Either way, I'm here. I'm ready to go. So I'm here and we're about to click play on the first Twilight movie, which is called Twilight. This one was released in 2008 and was directed by Catherine Hardwicke. I did some digging before I started recording this and found that she directed Mafia Mama, which was definitely without a doubt one of my favorite films from that year alone, and that I definitely did not give a 2-star rating to on my Letterboxd. So that makes me have high hopes for this one ultimately. I've actually heard from a few of my friends who have watched all of these movies that the first one is actually not the worst entry in the entire franchise, which is simultaneously reassuring and slightly concerning that this will probably get worse as I go along. As mentioned, I know next to nothing about this series except for its core premise of like a vampire falling in love with this chick, so I might be walking into something legitimately insane that I'm just not mentally prepared for. Alright, I'm genuinely stalling at this point. I still have 11 hours of this series to get through, so I'm pressing play now, and I'll see you on the other side. Please be good. Okay. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I can't say I enjoyed any part of that experience whatsoever. I'm sort of going through like a culture shock right now, to be frank with you. Like, that's what Twilight is. What the fuck? For some reason, that was simultaneously both what I expected and nothing like what I expected all at once. I mean, I knew the basic setup of the film going in, but I didn't realize it would actually be pulled off like that. I gotta get it out of the way first, that wasn't actually terrible, and I'm pleasantly surprised at that. This movie genuinely gave me hope that maybe this entire experience won't be as bad as I actually thought it was going to be. Maybe these movies aren't actually terrible, no matter how much my reason wants to fight back against this very notion. But as it stands, the first Twilight film sets out to do a specific job quite well in establishing the characters, their dynamics, and the overall tone of the story. And it pains me to say it, but Catherine Hardwicke actually did a decent job here as a filmmaker, to be sure. We're introduced to Bella here, the brooding teenage girl living with her mother in Phoenix, who decides to move with her little cactus to the town of Forks, Washington to live with her father. There's some sort of family dynamic at play here between the parents, but I'm not actually sure if the film cares enough to dive into this head first. Anyways, Bella moves to Forks and is immediately struck by how different this world is in basically every single way. The hot and warm climate of Phoenix is replaced with the foggy, rainy, and dreary atmosphere of the Pacific Northwest. If there's one thing to be said about the atmosphere of the film, it's that I actually love it so far. It actually genuinely puts me in a fall mood, and we're not even 2 full movies into the series yet. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that dull, monochrome, and quite cool color palette that just envelops you and never lets go, really lending itself to a cold and unfeeling atmosphere. Right after Bella moves to Forks, she is introduced to some old and new friends, including, you guessed it, is that Shark Boy in a wig? She starts attending school in Forks, and I was genuinely shocked to see Anna Kendrick in this movie of all things. Now, I get that this movie is a YA romance novel that takes place in high school, but I think one of the most inadvertently funny portions of this entire movie is how everyone at this high school treats Bella so abnormally. The group of friends she surrounds herself with are obsessed with her every move, almost to an unhealthy degree. I get that perhaps the intent here was to convey how in such a small town, the new arrival of someone causes a stir in the hierarchy of the school system, but I find it genuinely hilarious how everyone in this school acts like she's a freak of nature when she's literally the most relatively normal person attending school there, all things considered. But I guess it's easy to rank up there when you attend the same high school as the Cullen family, which is this abnormal family of mysterious pale-skinned kids who attend the school there. Despite the wise warnings of Anna Kendrick and the rest of the tropey high school clique group, Bella is drawn in particular to Edward, the Cullen who is in her grade. This is when we get this ridiculous first interaction between Edward and Bella in science class, and it just doesn't stop there. I think one of the things I genuinely hate about this movie is just how awkward so much of it is in every single moment. Every single conversation and interaction between Bella and Edward in this one is like pulling teeth. It's filled with awkward pacing, intonation, and the most baffling choices of dialogue ever put to a motion picture. It also doesn't help that Catherine Hardwicke is clearly trying to go for an overt music video aesthetic here, complete with edgy rock renditions in the background of scenes, and even a hilarious moment where ridiculous symbolic imagery paints Edward almost as a, quote, fallen angel. Yeah, quick question. Is this a movie or elaborate big-budget fan fiction? I genuinely can't tell at this point. Because Bella is inquisitive and is able to put 2 and 2 together after she's saved by a fatal car accident from Edward in an abnormal way, and Edward denies this with the lamest excuse I've ever seen, Bella begins to realize that Edward isn't like the other guys in Forks, and that's because, wait for this one, it was a major spoiler for me, he's a vampire. Shocking, right? And so begins the core centralized relationship that we will be following throughout the entirety of 4 more movies. So much fun, right? One of the things that just really sticks out to me upon first viewing in regards to Bella and Edward's relationship is how Bella is clearly off her rocker. And I do not see many people discussing this in depth in this conversation. There is literally a sequence after she confesses to Edward that she knows what he is, where he runs through how he thirsts for her blood, he's a monster, he's a killer, he wants to desperately kill her, yada yada yada. And Bella's just like, I don't care about any of that. You're so hot, I want to be with you. Sis, what the fuck? I genuinely think that, and this is kind of a hunch, that we'll be seeing many red flags from Bella throughout this franchise, and this has got to rank near the top of that list. What do you mean you don't care? For lack of a better term, Bella is kind of delusional for trying to fall in love with this guy. Not only is he a bloodthirsty vampire unable to control his desire for her flesh, but he's also apparently a literal creep with need for a restraining order.
How did you get in here?
The window? I like watching you sleep.
I think the hardest thing this franchise is going to ask me as an audience member to do over the course of 4 more movies is to actually not only buy into their relationship, but also understand and support it for plot purposes. Because right now, I can't get past the fact that it's not only awkward, but also ridiculous. They do not act like they care about each other in any real or meaningful way at any point in this film. This is classic angsty teen romance, complete with edgy needle drops and over-the-top music score moments that just hammer these points home. And that's another thing. Clearly, the entire Cullen family is different from the other residents of Forks both aesthetically and visually. They're vampires, they're freakishly pale, they have glowing yellow eyes, they disappear for long periods of time. How has no one in this entire town taken notice of these people and investigated further? Despite this, however, they mostly begin to take a liking to Bella for some reason, which leads to some incredible cinematic moments to be sure, including a sequence where the vampire family plays baseball during a thunderstorm while Muse plays in the background. You know, the more I say this stuff out loud, the more I'm convinced that this is actually not a real movie and I just hallucinated the entire thing. However, the Cullens really rally around Bella after some new vampires stroll through town and notice that Bella sort of a human, you know? And because they're vampires, they're trying to capture and kill her outside of the protection of Edward. You know, it's crazy how uninterested and uninvested I was in most of the last act of this movie. Maybe this content would have hit harder if I didn't, know that there are 4 other movies after this and that no one serious is going to die at this point. But the stakes and tension used to highlight key moments in the climax of this film was just not present whatsoever. Catherine Hardwicke also leans so heavily into the style of this one that it's hard to tell if moments are supposed to be funny or if that's a major accident. But either way, to say that I didn't laugh my ass off at so many portions of this movie is an understatement. The sequence where Edward bounces an apple off his foot and recreates the first book cover is without a doubt knockout the funniest thing I've seen in a while. Overall though, for no matter how campy, over the top, and ridiculous the material here was, I was never actually uninvested. This is a deeply entertaining movie, whether I actually want to admit that or not, and I'm actually surprised to see so many of the key elements that work in this film's favor in terms of tone and atmosphere in general. I am, however, interested to see how the qualities of these films progress as I go along, as I've heard that supposedly, these get worse and worse the farther you go into the series. Can't wait. However, as a standalone entry introducing key characters and establishing the world of this franchise, this entry actually does a surprisingly solid job. I'm not sure I'm going to be won over to Team Edward or any team in general. I hope not. I hope I don't become a fan of this franchise as I progress along. But at least this film was enough for me to go, that was interesting. I understand why people would like this. And most importantly, I wonder where this series goes on from here. And when you're like me and you're forcing yourself to watch all of these movies in one day, that's the thought that counts. All right, guys, it is currently 9:50, and we're just continuing straight into this marathon of pure, unadulterated madness. Genuinely still can't comprehend I'm even doing this right now, but here we go. The next movie is now up, which is called The Twilight Saga: New Moon. I'm guessing that this addition of the saga to the name is just aesthetic for some reason. This one released in 2008 and is directed by Chris Weitz, who actually did 2018's Operation Finale, which is in my opinion an extremely underrated film. Am I expecting something on the level of that? Hardly. I've heard a few rumors about this one from a few of my friends who have watched this series, and that rumor is that this is supposedly one of the worst films in the entire franchise by far, which on the one hand, I'm happy about, because that means if I can get through this one, the rest of the experience probably won't be as bad. The question though is if I can get through this one, which remains to be seen. Don't really know anything about the plot of this one. I'm assuming it's just a continuation of the incredibly awkward romance set up in the first one between Bella and Edward. I know for a fact that at some point in the series, because I'm aware of the pop culture impact, that there's apparently a love triangle between Jacob, Edward, and Bella at some point in this franchise. So I'm thinking it might start here, which is interesting to track, because he is on the poster after all. Otherwise, I'm just going in with an open mind with zero expectations whatsoever. Maybe that will help my enjoyment of this one, but who am I kidding? This is 2 hours and 15 minutes, making it the longest film in the franchise, so this genuinely might be an excruciating experience. Who knows? Alright, I'm about to start it. I'll see you on the other side. Please send kind thoughts and condolences my way because I might need it. Oh. I'm just going to say this up front so no one is confused. I hated this movie. I am genuinely just flabbergasted at this one. I don't even know what else to say, really. It's not even that the movie itself is inherently terrible, which it genuinely is. I just hate everything about the story here. I was right when I guessed it would continue the events of the first film, but I didn't expect it to be like that. I think I was already zoned out of this one when it started off with a hallucinatory dream sequence. Like, ugh, guys, it's so 2008. You see, Bella and Edward are still going strong, even though her involvement with him almost killed her in the last movie. I'm guessing this is going to be a recurring theme in the series, given there's 3 movies left. Like, Bella probably shouldn't be dating or romantically involved with Edward, but will continue pursuing this because she's just incredibly naive, or just stupid, one of the two. But you see, this time, Bella's worried about something else. That's because she's finally clued into the fact that Edward doesn't age, because of the whole undead vampire thing that was set up in the first film. And Bella, she's human. That means she's gonna get old. And Bella is not happy with that shit. And she's starting to worry about it, like, quite a lot. It's also at this point in the series that I want to get it out of the way that these movies are not even being subtle with the vampire makeup anymore. Like, there's no way. Like, sure, it was present in the first film, but it was actually pulled off in a way that felt more subtle and confusing. But here, they're literally just making the Cullen family straight up pale. It's also Bella's 18th birthday here, which might as well be a national holiday in the town of Forks, the way everyone seems to know about it. This includes Jacob Black, Taylor Lautner from the first one, who's back with this awful wig again. In classic Twilight fashion, we are treated to some more incredibly awkward romance between Bella and Edward that feels incredibly forced.
Bella, you give me everything just by breathing.
It seems like the Cullen family wants to get in on the birthday fun too, because they decided to throw a big old birthday bash for Bella at their residence in the middle of the woods. It's at this point in the series that I genuinely have some legitimate questions about this whole undead vampire family thing. Chief among them, what the hell is Dr. Cullen making per year to afford a rocking ass modern house like that in the middle of the woods in Washington? At the birthday bash, Bella's clumsy self decides to show an appearance, which causes her to cut her finger quite violently and over the top from a simple paper cut, which results in some members of the Cullen family legitimately tweaking out at the sight of her blood. Look, I can suspend disbelief in severe cases as a film critic, but I do not think you're going to bleed this much from a small paper cut. Let's be for real. Edward's pretty upset about this whole situation, and he starts to realize that apparently he's putting Bella's mortal life in danger by being with her. Imagine that. It's almost like I could have told you that from the first film in general. Because of this, he decides to break up with her in the most half-assed way possible, and both himself and his family leave town. So, how does Bella react to the situation? Well, not great. At first, she turns emo, locking herself inside of a room while a camera spins around her in a circle to show the passing of the seasons, which is very funny. So yeah, Bella's obviously not handling things well, and it worries everyone, including the MVP of this franchise, Charlie, who continues to be my favorite character in this series by far, and the only voice of reason in this kind of mess. I don't want to foreshadow anything at all, but if anything ends up happening to him, I'm going to be kind of upset. Bella ultimately realizes in order to get over Edward, she's going to have to distract herself with some friends, which results in her hanging out with Anna Kendrick again, who embodies every annoying Letterboxd user out there.
It's supposed to be a metaphor for consumerism, because don't be so pleased with your own, self-referential cleverness,
But she doesn't just stop there. Oh no. Instead, she decides to run to hang out with Jacob, running straight to another dude as a backup after a breakup. Holy red flag, Bella. Obviously, I'm not the only one who sees this either, as Mike, that one annoying character from the first movie, clearly has some beef with Jacob as well, which results in a very funny sequence where there's a 3-way date at the movie theater.
Are you even old enough to see this movie? I mean, without, adult supervision.
Right, yeah. Well, she's buying my ticket for me.
Fine.
Okay.
And then, for literally no valid reason whatsoever, Jacob leaves Bella and doesn't contact her at all. Great friends, right? That's the recurring theme in this movie series, I guess. This movie series should just be called Characters I Hate Being Annoying for 2 hours, because holy shit, this is a tough watch. But it's okay though, because Bella manages to track down Jacob, who has a new haircut and tattoo and claims he's not like other guys anymore. Turns out that Jacob's going through some changes of his own too, because wait for this is ridiculous. He's a werewolf. I wish I was joking. I wish I was joking.
So you're a werewolf?
Yeah. Last time I checked.
This franchise is genuinely just throwing whatever it can at the wall and hoping something sticks, because how is this going to be your plot? You see, it turns out that Jacob and the entire Quilut tribe are descended from wolves, and their beef with the vampires extends way back into history. It turns out that whenever a new vampire moves into town, their shape-shifting powers kick back in, which is timed conveniently with the arrival of Laurent, that one evil vampire from the first movie who was back to kill off Bella once and for all. I need to ask, at this point in the series, why it is that both dudes Bella has fallen in love with at this point have turned out to be supernatural monsters. I mean, I feel like that reflects as another red flag on you as a person. I think it says more about you than anything else. I'd personally probably leave the dating scene in Forks at that point altogether. I mean, twice is bad enough. 3 times, just what are we doing? Also, as a part of this conversation, because it is an essential plot point to this movie in particular, I do want to bring up that how apparently Stephanie Meyer, the author of this book series, based in the movie's fictional Quileute tribe on the actual Quileute tribe of the same name that is located in La Push, Washington. And apparently the reaction from real life tribe members in relation to the portrayal in this series is, sort of mixed, to put it lightly. There have been accusations of cultural appropriation and misrepresentation across the board, where apparently many feel the tribe's oral history and imagery have been used for profit without fair compensation or representation in terms of credit. Also, the fictionalized werewolf origin of the tribe has been criticized for with a complete lack of context in terms of the history of the tribe itself, and has also been a wide point of conversation how tasteful it is. Again, I'm out of my depth when it comes to this conversation, so I won't make a comment on it either way, but I do kind of want to highlight it here because I do find it's important to sort of consider that through an alternate viewpoint outside my own. What to say about this movie overall? Well, for starters, it's not good at all. This is 10 times worse than the first entry was, and that is saying something. It seems that the campy atmosphere has been replaced with a more serious and grounded tone, which completely misses the point of what the series is trying to do. I mean, you're a movie about werewolves and vampires fighting over this one human girl. Please don't take yourself too seriously. In all honesty, though, even though it's a terrible movie, there are some elements of this that deserve mention as such. The direction and cinematography actually aren't terrible. Portions of this are shot to look like a music video for sure, capturing the aesthetic that Catherine Hardwicke imparted in the first one in such a visceral and impactful way that fits the tone of this world perfectly. And that soundtrack, oh my gosh, it's just back-to-back bangers here. That Bon Iver and St. Vincent song in particular has me feeling intense waves of nostalgia that I didn't even think were possible. And I ultimately think this movie is at its best when it at least attempts to convey some semblance of character development in terms of the interactions between Charlie and Bella, or even Jacob and Bella as well. Ultimately, however, I find the weakest portion of this film, besides the overarching romance plot, is just how bland and uninteresting the material is overall. The movie at least imparts a complex angle with the introduction of Volturi, which is that one mystical, mysterious vampire cult headed by Michael Sheen and Jamie Campbell Bower. But even this portion of the film feels stunted and segmented from the rest of the material here. This feels like a movie that's trying to juggle way too much with way too little, introducing separate side plots and intriguing angles that never actually committing to actual excitement or intrigue in this regard. It does have select moments throughout, I guess, including an extremely admittedly cool sequence where Jacob in werewolf form fights a vampire while Radiohead plays in the background, like hell yeah. But overall, I left this one wondering where the actual core plot of the movie was, because when you really think about it, this movie is really not about anything at all, which is not something I want to be confused about when you leave a film. That's typically not a good sign. At least the film ended on a solid enough note, further establishing the very confusing and not at all annoying love triangle between the 3 central characters of this franchise. But even that feels confusing and ultimately unengaging at this point. For myself personally, I could care less about any of these characters in general. They all sort of suck when you think about it. Bella is extremely toxic and consistently makes the worst decisions that affect the people who love her without her even caring about the outcome for them. Jacob is impulsive and genuinely obnoxious, never knowing when to shut his mouth. And Edward genuinely comes across as cold, stone-faced, and unfeeling, which is often confusing when audiences are unable to discern if he even cares for Bella at portions. Like, genuinely, for a movie series that relies on you caring desperately about what happens to the relationship, I am so uninvested at this point because this film never makes an effort to make audiences care about it. Rather, this entire story of this franchise revolves around whether you buy into this relationship or not. And it's ultimately just something I'm not able to do for myself at this point. So yeah, that was the Twilight Saga New Moon. Am I excited to continue on the story about Bella having to choose between a walking corpse and a literal dog? I guess. The time is currently 1:01 p.m. and we are not slowing down for anything. We're heading right into the next installment. You know, I'm slowly starting to feel this challenge as I go along. Like, I'm so detached emotionally from everything that's going on in this franchise, and we're not even halfway through it. Next up is the 3rd installment, the Twilight Saga Eclipse, which was released in 2010. This one is directed by David Slade, who went on to do some really cool work with Black Mirror Bandersnatch later on in his career. What I like about these films is how they actually pull legitimate filmmakers who know what they're doing and have a clear artistic vision to create vampire romance fan fiction, and that's ultimately what I'm thinking these movies are at this point, let's be honest. I researched online just now before starting this recording and found out that Stephanie Meyer, the author of the books these movies are based on, apparently wrote this series based on a dream she had of a human girl falling in love with a vampire who loved her but still wanted to kill her. That genuinely makes me wonder whether Meyer views herself as Bella by extension, as if she's writing the character based off of her in some way. I don't know, just something to really think about and kind of explains a lot. I would try to say that I have expectations going into this one, but at this point, what even are expectations except false realities that you hope a movie will be able to achieve? And I don't really expect this movie to really achieve anything. I guess. I'm tired, I'm confused, I might be dehydrated at this point, but damn it, I must find out if Bella stays with the vampire or the werewolf. I'm too far in at this point. This one is 2 hours, 3 minutes, which isn't that terrible of a runtime, so hopefully this at least manages to capture some more of the highs that other entries in this franchise have teased thus far. Although after that awful second installment I just watched, I severely doubt it. I still can't believe I'm doing this. Holy shit. Well, the Twilight saga Eclipse just happened, and I gotta say, definitely my favorite of the entire franchise thus far. I am pleasantly surprised at how much of a step up this is in basically every single way. Don't get me wrong, this still manages to capture plenty of the brooding romance moments we've come to know, love, and expect from this series, but it does so in a more natural way with an actual capable plotline, which you know I appreciate. This movie actually has an intriguing story in comparison, which was a welcome surprise to be sure. Don't get me wrong, I'm not calling this movie great or amazing in any regard. I'm not that crazy. I think this reaction is purely operating off of the fact that my experience with this franchise so far has not been the greatest, and at the first sign of genuine cinematic quality and merit, I'm jumping on it like the Cullens jump on animals in the forest to feast on their blood. You see that analogy right there? I'm catching on the Twilight lingo. I hate myself. Eclipse starts in the most picturesque location you could possibly begin a motion picture. Seattle, Washington. Amid the confusion of hearing the Black Keys playing in the background of this opening scene, we're treated to an extremely confusing and overly melodramatic opening scene of this poor kid getting chased down and turned into a vampire. The movie then abruptly cuts back with no warning to our present situation. Oh, how I've missed Edward and Bella. Not really. It's been like 20 minutes since I watched the last one. This time around, Edward's flaunting around the idea of marriage. But Bella, you see, doesn't just want to marry Edward, she wants to be like Edward. She wants Edward to turn into a vampire for some reason. It's at this point that I'm going to make the claim that Bella as a character is extremely fucking stupid. Why would you even want to be a vampire? You are genuinely so head over heels with this dude that you want to become an undead blood-sucking corpse. I get that love is love. There comes a time when reason has to enter the picture, abruptly shake you by the shoulders and say, hey, killing yourself to be with some guy is probably not worth it. And one could argue that's like a Shakespearean kind of angle for the story to explore, but like, sure, Bella might make the argument that she and Edward will be together in their undead eternity forever, but what happens if some other vampire chick comes along and then Edward decides to dump you? Then you're Edwardless and also stuck as a vampire. I genuinely don't even get the sense that Bella is a character written in a way to consider details like this, but hopefully this series doesn't go there, because if it does, I am not going to be a happy camper. Amid the confusion of this weird color grading, like seriously, what visual tone is this movie trying to strike? We get some more callbacks from past series entries. Mike is back with a weird ass haircut. And even Jacob is back, everyone's favorite werewolf. That weird forced beef with Edward is still more than present in this entry, because even after a tense confrontation scene occurs between the two characters, Edward does literally nothing when his girl jumps on the back of Jacob's motorcycle and rides off like 2 seconds later. You see, she does this because apparently Victoria, remember that one redheaded vampire from the other movies, is back. And for some reason this time around she's played by Bryce Dallas Howard, which I am not complaining about because we need more Bryce Dallas Howard and I am a huge fan of her work. You see, remember that awkward like cold open scene at the start with the kid getting chased by the vampire? Apparently Victoria is hard at work creating an army of newborn vampires in Seattle, because you know that's just like average Seattle activities, you know, training their thirst so that they can get revenge on Edward for killing her lover James like a few movies ago. Overall, while the subplot is mildly interesting, it does feel somewhat segmented from the rest of the movie overall and kind of sticks out as such. It feels like that one episode from like Stranger Things season 2 where Eleven goes to visit the other kids with powers, in a complete departure from the rest of the season, and then like nothing ever comes of the subplot again. This entire movie could basically be summed up as Edward and Bella saying, "Let's marry," over and over again, and then Jacob taking the news, you know, quite well. Again, it cannot be overstated how much I hate every single character in the series without fail. It is like genuinely impressive. That is, except for Charlie, my MVP, who is back and continues to be the one voice of reason amid all of the chaos that people call a complete movie. The Cullen family and Jacob's werewolf pack realize that Victoria and her army are coming to kill Bella to get revenge on Edward because, I guess, Edward killed Victoria's lover. So they strike up an uneasy truce for the first time in literal centuries in order to protect her. This leads to a very funny training montage that I would complain about more in depth, but I'm too tired and delirious from these movies to even attempt that right now. However, it's within this portion of the film that there arises an element that I respect more out of Eclipse than any other entry in this franchise thus far, which is how it actually devotes time to character development in terms of fleshing out members of the Cullens. Seen in particular instances where we get the backstories of both Jasper and Rosalie. I actually appreciate this film more because of how it actually takes the time to explore character backstories and dynamics in a meaningful way. Although how impactful these moments are within the overall story is another point entirely. With the vampire and werewolf team up underway, seriously, are these movies even real at this point? Jacob, Edward, and Bella set off to the top of a mountain where they hope to hide away from Victoria and her army while the rest of the Cullens and Quaaludes fight them off. You know, this sounds like a perfectly good idea, right? Surely nothing sufficiently awkward will result of the situation, right?
And let's face it, I am hotter than you.
I swear, so much of the tension in this situation will be averted if Jacob just stopped instigating shit and shut up for once. However, it's at this point where the movie really clicked in for me in so many areas, and really managed to stand apart from the rest of the competition for this franchise in so many ways. That final battle sequence is legitimately great, both in terms of the vampire-werewolf brawl and the personal confrontation between Victoria, Edward, and Bella as well. It's sufficiently tense and motivated, allowing the performers the ability to really play around with the material in a way that feels subtle and motivated. As a villain, Victoria's downfall here actually feels nuanced and satisfying, especially in the angle in which she lures the human she turned at the beginning of the film, Riley, into a romantic relationship where she can manipulate and use him to her benefit and ditch him at the first sign of trouble, which really allows audiences to truly view her in such an effective and distasteful light. She is so sinister. Even a lot of the character-driven stuff here feels so much more nuanced and complex compared to the other series entries thus far. The awkward father-daughter dynamic between Charlie and Bella has been somewhat explored in the other films, but here there's a really heartfelt sequence between the two where a sufficiently awkward dad talk occurs, and it just feels so complex and real in comparison. It's at this point in the series where I really understood what I like about Charlie's character, which is that in a sea of manipulative and flawed characters who surround Bella and show her a fake facsimile of love that masquerades as anything but, Charlie is the only one in Bella's immediate life, except for her real mom, that genuinely cares for and wants what is best for Bella, which makes it so much more frustrating when Bella just doesn't listen to him at all. I also found Howard Shore's music score here to be a step above franchise offerings thus far, really feeling more in line with his work on Lord of the Rings in key areas, and really driving home the dramatic stakes of the film in a tense and unrelenting way. And as mentioned, I really appreciate the fact that this film clearly cares about devoting time to contextualizing these characters and their arcs in a satisfying and nuanced way. And it kind of starts to do that between Jacob and Edward, which I really craved from this franchise and needed overall. So far, all we've gotten in this series between the two is an awkward, confrontational area that feels incredibly forced, but there are portions of this film for sure, especially within the tense scene in particular, where we actually get to see these two connect and interact in a meaningful way, where they start to realize that perhaps it's better to put aside their differences in order to care for the person they both love, which, can I just say, took them both long enough to realize, honestly. I could have told you that maybe, 2 movies ago. In that way, I can confidently say that Eclipse is definitely the film in this series thus far that I've enjoyed the most, which is honestly such a relief to say. Maybe things are indeed looking up from here, although I don't want to call it too early. However, for no matter how much I enjoyed the overall filmmaking and story aspect of this film, there is one particular quality of this that continued to aggravate me to no ends, which is genuinely just Bella as a character. Like, I don't know if this is a common reaction for first-time viewers of this franchise and people just like going into this blind, but I genuinely just find her grating and deeply unlikable as a character. She genuinely uses people around her for her own personal gain, toys with emotions like she's a preschooler playing in a sandbox at recess, never cares about her actions and the impact they actually have upon the people around her, and above all, continues to lead both Jacob and Edward on. Holy shit. Pick one. The sequence where she confesses her love for both Edward and Jacob, but then claims she loves Edward more than Jacob is just like a major eye roll. Again, I understand that this is like the entire dramatic focus of this film series, which really relies on this core love triangle to invest audiences into the stakes, but we're 3 movies in, and I'm already tempted to just scream at the television screen to just pick one already. I am so tired of this like wishy-washy characterization, as it not only feels grating, but also superficial, as Bella never feels like a solid or grounded character and how her emotions, actions, and feelings change on a whim. That's ultimately why I find it's difficult to understand her character in any meaningful way throughout the series so far, as her characterization just shifts by the day. It does help that she and Edward do in fact get engaged at the end of this film, but who knows what that means for the rest of the series. I'm kind of scared to ask. My hope is that these other movie entries are able to wrap up or solidify her arc in a meaningful way, but with only 2 movies left, I'm struggling to see how that could possibly happen. If there's one thing I agree with Jacob on, and I hate to admit it, it's that the stupidest decision that Bella could make is getting turned into a vampire. And if that happens, I'm not sure what I'll think about the conclusion of this franchise overall. We're here at the 4th installment in this insane series. I cannot believe I've made it this far. I am telling you right now, this has felt like the longest day in my entire life so far. But we're nowhere close to being over. Oh, no. It's currently 5:36, and I'm about to press play on the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1, which was released in 2011. That's right, apparently the last installment in the series is so crazy they had to split it into 2 parts. I'm normally not a fan of that structure and device in most other film franchises, but who knows, maybe Twilight will will be the one series to pull it off. Now, heading to this one, I don't know if it's the fact that I'm so close to being done with this series, or if the last installment's pleasantly enjoyable experience got me in a positive mindset somewhat, but I'm actually looking forward to seeing what awaits in this one. Or maybe I'm just becoming enthralled to this franchise and becoming a fan. Who knows? I think this is the one where Bella and Edward are going to get married, and I'm sure little wolf boy Jacob isn't going to be too happy with that decision overall. I'm genuinely running through my head a variety of scenarios and how I think this series is going to end because I have zero clue. So it should be fun to see how this actually plays out. This installment was directed by Bill Condon, who is actually a really well-known filmmaker. He did movies like Dreamgirls, the 2017 live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast, and most recently this year, the remake of Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Again, going in line with the Twilight series theme of talented filmmakers getting stuck adapting thankless fanfiction to the big screen, Condon is yet another prime example of this. He's actually a really solid filmmaker in terms of choreography and blocking, so maybe his expertise will actually lend itself to the closing chapter of the saga. I really don't have any expectations going into this one because this franchise has basically beat them all down at this point. I just legitimately hope that this series ends off on a satisfying note, because if I spent 6 hours of my life so far committed to watching this series, I don't want to feel like I wasted my time. I am fighting off sleep at this point. My mind is whirling around with visions of vampires and werewolves, and I genuinely feel like some permanent brain damage might have resulted from this experience thus far and can't be ruled out, but damn it, I'm in it to win it. I'll pry my eyes open if I have to in order to sit through these last two movies. I don't care. I'll see you on the other side of this one. Oh boy. Guys, I'm going to be so honest with you right here now. That was horrid. I think New Moon might have some competition as the worst Twilight movie out there, because that was just 2 hours of absolutely nothing happening. Usually, whenever I see a property that has been split into multiple cinematic parts, as was the case with Peter Jackson's bizarre Hobbit trilogy, a question that is always present in the back of my mind is whether this story actually needs to be split up in 2 distinct parts or not. And in the case of Breaking Dawn for Twilight in particular, I'm not definitively sure because I have yet to watch part 2 of this conclusion, but my answer is heavily leaning towards probably not. Not only does this film feel excruciatingly long, not only are many of the directorial choices baffling here to say the least, but oh my gosh, we are getting to the point in this franchise where all hell is breaking loose and it's getting weird as fuck. Again, some of these choices I'm actually fine with. There are a few big swings in this movie where I sort of went, hell yeah, a little bit out there, but I can work with this. And then there are some that are just baffling. Bella and Edward are getting married at the beginning of this movie, which shouldn't be a cause for surprise considering they got engaged at the end of the last one. Jacob's understandably pretty pissed about this, because it seems like he actually cares for Bella, and the last thing he wants to see is her eternally undead like Edward, because that's another thing. Bella and Edward have this one little stipulation that once they marry, Bella's going to get turned into a vampire. I don't understand the reasoning behind this, and I genuinely don't think Bella does either. We don't really get a complex exploration to why Bella wants to be a vampire outside of just wanting to be with Edward, which is sort of a lame excuse, I'm sorry to say. Like drastically changing your status from living to dead just to be with some guy. Am I supposed to clap for that? Am I supposed to celebrate that? It seems like in the preparations for the ceremony, however, Bella's got the pre-wedding nerves going on about everything. Maybe this is the chance for the movie to really explore Bella's drastic decision and to showcase character development and how she doesn't know if she actually wants to partake in such a change. Well, too bad, because the film moves straight past this with no warning whatsoever. Charlie and Bella's mom are helping out with the wedding ceremony preparations, and somehow they still don't realize the Cullens are all vampires.
Are those graduation caps?
How creative.
And it turns out they might as well have invited the entire town of Forks to this wedding. I spot Anna Kendrick and Mike in the back of the crowd, but alas, no signs of Jacob, who's pretty much been MIA since he received the wedding invitation in the mail. I gotta admit it, as much as I might dislike the Cullen family, they do know how to throw a rocking wedding, because I mean, look at this venue. This fantasy woodland-esque setting is genuinely so cool, and it allows for some unique visual variety through which Bill Condon can really explore and experiment with the direction and cinematography in portions. As a wedding present, Bella is shocked to see Jacob appear again, who's been pretty much spending all of his time recently as a wolf running around the woods in the last few weeks. He's happy at first, but because his character is wildly unpredictable and borderline bipolar, his mood switches just like that once Bella tells him that she and Edward plan to go on their honeymoon and they want to get, down and dirty. Jacob understandably doesn't like that idea, and so he runs off again for reasons. Jacob does a lot of running off in this franchise. It's like a recurring character theme. Flash forward to Bella and Edward arriving on this private island in the middle of nowhere for their honeymoon. It's at this point in the movie where I started to check the time on my phone, really earnestly. We're high-key 30 minutes into the movie at this point, and we're still going over the setup of everything. Looks like I'm out of luck too, as the movie continues to go through this self-indulgent and quite unintentionally hilarious honeymoon sequence, where the two characters finally consummate their marriage and love in the most over-the-top sequence I have ever seen in a romance film, complete with the most most seductive music, and the most book talk level steamy camera angles I have ever seen. I'm just going to put this one screen cap on the screen here and not comment on it further because, it's pretty self-explanatory. Hey, Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1, what are you even actually about? Because it seems like we're actually an entire 50 minutes into the movie at this point and nothing is still happening on screen. This might be the worst paced Twilight film thus far alone. Finally, the movie locks in relation to a plot when one morning, Bella wakes up, profusely vomits, and realizes it's not because of the food she just ate. Rather, it's something else inside of her. It seems that when Edward and Bella, the other evening, that Bella is indeed pregnant with something. No one really knows if it's a vampire or human or a cross between the two. All Bella and Edward know is that shit is growing way too fast and that Bella might not survive for much longer. Let me give the characters the benefit of the doubt here, as it's a movie after all, but genuinely, respectively, is this not a situation you two idiots saw coming a mile away? Like, were there no conversations whatsoever about the ramifications of a vampire and a human conceiving a baby? This is why it's hard to even emphasize as a viewer with the shocked faces of Bella and Edward in this entire situation, because, like, what the fuck did you expect? Edward and Bella cut their honeymoon short in order to get back to Dr. Cullen, who's pretty nervous about the situation understandably. He delivers the news that it's pretty unlikely that Bella could survive from giving birth to a vampire's baby, but despite everything else, Bella agrees to go through with the pregnancy. Seems like that baby is sapping all of Bella's strength too, because she starts to have a whole pale, shaky, really skinny thing going on. Everyone's pretty upset about all of this, but especially Jacob, who meets with the other neighborhood werewolves to devise a plan to kill Bella to ensure that the hybrid baby is not able to kill anyone once it's born, because that's like, makes sense, I guess. But because Jacob is still obsessed with Bella, he refuses and departs from the pack with two other werewolves, Seth and Leah, who decide they have to protect Bella and the baby from their own kind. This movie is also extremely weird, and then the movie continues to push the envelope by including a scene where, in order to remain strong, Bella has to drink blood out of a styrofoam cup in order to give the nutrients to the vampire baby who craves them. But trust me, that is not the weirdest part of this entire situation or movie by far. The delivery date finally occurs, and if anyone was wondering if this would be a clean, natural birth, you are in for basically anything but. This is like a very graphic, on-screen C-section, and that is an accurate statement. The vampire kid is literally tearing out of Bella, and the baby is ultimately finally delivered, which Bella names Renesmee because it's a mashup of her and Edward's mother's names. Can we talk about this freaky-looking CGI baby for a second? Because legitimately, what the f*** is that thing? Twilight, you're an extremely popular movie series with adoring fans everywhere. Could we not find it anywhere in the massive budget to actually use a real baby for these scenes? But it looks like that's the least of the problems here, since Bella dies shortly after she delivers the baby. And Edward and Jacob are both distraught, but they both seem to have really different ways of working through their grief. Edward injects Bella with his vampire venom to try to turn and save her, but to no avail, while Jacob offers words of encouragement to Edward during this difficult time that I'm sure will help him feel better.
You deserve to live with this.
Jacob wants to kill the baby Renesmee for killing Bella, but then begins the wildest plot twist that completely blindsided me out of nowhere. I'm still struggling to understand if this is real, if I hallucinated it, if this is actually like what happens in the movie. Because Jacob is a literal wolf, there's been a recurrent theme throughout the last two movies about how wolves uncontrollably imprint on people to create a shared and special bond, in which a protective and personal bond forms, and eventually romantic attraction could occur between the two individuals. It's never really clarified if it's actual romance or just like something else. Jacob's always lamenting about the fact that he's never actually found someone to imprint with like the other wolves in his pack. And whenever this was brought up in the previous movies, I really didn't think anything of it personally, because it felt like an external plot point that wasn't necessary to the overall structure of the story. But when he's about to kill Renesmee, when he's about to kill the baby that Bella has just given birth to, Jacob imprints on her. What do you mean that's a plot point of this series? Are you being for real? Jacob imprints on a newborn baby of the woman he's constantly been in love with this entire time? Dog, I can't believe these movies are even real. Turns out this imprinting thing is a good thing for the safety of Bella's baby though, because it turns out in the most MacGuffin-based plot device imaginable that whoever a wolf imprints on has to be protected by the werewolves, meaning they can't harm or kill Renesmee. And you know that venom that Edward injected Bella with to transform her? The movie ends with her transforming into a vampire, further confirming my fears and suspicions walking into this one. In terms of how I would actually analyze Breaking Dawn cinematically, outside of the standpoint of the baffling narrative content I still can't get over, like how was that even real? I would say that this film ultimately just feels unnecessary. Like I would like to know the reason why this story was ultimately split into two distinct parts. Like I feel like this movie could have been trimmed down to like 30 or 40 minutes and then just stuffed in the beginning of Breaking Dawn Part 2, as the next installment is only 2 hours as well, so that would have been like under 3 hours. Not only does the content here not feel self-sufficient for the content of a full feature-length project, but it also interrupts the flow and pacing of the story, considering nothing truly impactful or important happens until nearly an hour hour into this movie. In terms of things I explicitly liked, I guess there are a few. Bill Condon's direction isn't actually terrible. This looks like a cinematic movie through and through, and it definitely is the Twilight movie with the most narrative depth and nuance in every single cinematography shot. The direction and blocking isn't terrible, and the CGI, particularly on the werewolves, looks quite good as well. Where the CGI doesn't look good, however, is in Renesmee herself. This is the most uncanny valley cinematic creation I've seen in quite some time, and genuinely triggers a fight or flight response in me. I do appreciate the distinct angle of how Jacob and Edward are starting to work together as well, as it seems that they've started to put aside their differences and realize they both have to protect the person they care about, which in response I'll say, took you long enough. I just still can't get over the whole imprinting thing. Like, holy shit. What does that even mean for the story in general? I guess we might or might not find out in relation to the next movie, which is the definitive conclusion to the series once and for all. I'm still struggling to see where this franchise is ultimately going to end, as it does seem like anything could happen at this point, and I just need to be mentally prepared for what that is. But other than that, I'm exhausted. I am rambling at this point. This movie took it out of me, and I have one more movie to get through. So yeah. Breaking Dawn Part 1, not a fan at all. All right, we're here. We did it. The finish line is finally in sight. I've got 4 Twilight movies knocked out of the way, and the only one that remains is Breaking Dawn Part 2. I've held on as much as I can throughout this experience thus far, and I think I'm either at my limit or extremely close. It's an uphill battle to keep my eyes open at this point, and all I want to do is just lie down and go to sleep, where delusional dreams of vampire and werewolf romance might infiltrate my subconsciousness all night, considering that's all I've witnessed with my day-to-day. I'm so close. I can feel it. It is currently 8:10. In the evening. In just 2 short hours, I'll have this franchise behind me, and I'll have experienced all that the Twilight craze has to offer. This one released in 2012 and is once again directed by Bill Condon, as I believe, don't quote me on this, that they shot these back to back. So for that reason, I'm not really expecting anything overtly different from what Part 1 of Breaking Dawn accomplished, but given that this is the conclusion of the saga, I hope the conclusion is at least worthwhile. I can't even begin to describe how much it would suck if I devoted my entire day to the series just for the ending to be subpar. I don't think I could ever recover emotionally from that. I'm going to be honest. You guys know the drill at this point. I have zero expectations. I have no clue about what's about to happen within this hour and 55-minute runtime, but I guess we'll see. Am I sad to leave the series behind? Not really. There's a small part of me that's kind of like, aw, it's the last movie in the series. But then my voice of reason really shuts that one up quickly. I can say I did kind of enjoy my time in this werewolf vampire romance madhouse because of how weird it is. And there is a small part of me that feels somewhat bittersweet that this kind of is the end. After all, I've spent the better part of several hours now with these characters. And given that this is the last installment, anything could happen. Just please don't let Charlie die. That's all I'm asking from this franchise. Please be able to deliver that. All right, I'll see you guys on the other side. Hope this is good. Well, we're here. We did it. Twilight Saga mountain hike has been officially conquered. Granted, there were some definitive bumps along the trail as I went along, for no matter how smooth and monotonous the hike up was in portions, there were several landslides we had to work through for sure. Yet, I finally reached the end, and what do I have to show for it exactly? Well, let's talk about Breaking Dawn Part 2, the definitive end of this story that is miles better than Part 1 of this conclusion. I know that was one of my major fears going into this one, considering how much I hated the last one, but as it stands, even if the story is just as ridiculous, and even if the characters continue to make stupid decision after stupid decision, the main difference in this execution here is how each moment and choice is tinged with a melancholic edge, as if in a nostalgic reflection of the traits we know and love from these characters so far. I think the ultimate thing that stands out about this conclusion for me, and the reason I ultimately walked away from it emotionally content and satisfied, is because no matter how much I complained or hated many of these characters throughout this franchise, I always did want this series to have a happy ending in some regard, where character arcs felt fulfilled and nothing was left up to chance. And from a purely franchise conclusive way, Breaking Dawn Part 2 might as well be the return of the king of the Twilight franchise. Before I'm attacked by rabid fanboys in the comments below, I am not comparing these films in terms of quality. Rather, I'm stating this from the viewpoint of how each arc here feels wrapped up in a meaningful way, and nothing feels unexplored or unexplained. We get closure for basically everyone involved in this this series, and that makes all the difference. Am I weird for saying that Breaking Dawn Part 2 ultimately made this entire viewing experience worth it in the end? It might as well have, considering how much I enjoyed this conclusion overall. As was established in the last entry, Bella is now a full-blown vampire, complete with a thirst for blood and fangs. However, as is the case for every newborn vampire in this series, controlling her thirst for blood is not entirely easy, and it's lucky she has Edward to guide her every step of the way. After she gets her newfound self under control, she's able to meet her daughter Renesmee, who continues to be the creepiest looking CGI baby I've seen in quite some time, and I mean every single word of that. However, Bella's pretty pissed off when she finds out about Jacob's whole imprinting on her daughter's situation from the last movie, which leads to the greatest dialogue exchange ever put to film.
From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
Academy Award nominee Kristen Stewart, everyone. Anyways, Bella and Edward have bigger fish to fry when they realize that Charlie, Bella's dad, has been trying to contact them for days for an update on Bella's health. The Cullens try to formulate how they'll exactly break the news to Charlie about Bella's changes, or if they even should, but because Jacob's an impulsive person, he decides to do it his own way.
Trust me.
Anyways, Jacob shows Charlie he can turn into a massive wolf monster. Bella's pretty pissed about this because anyone who apparently knows about their existence is in danger of being harmed. And I feel that, because if anything happens to my MVP of this franchise, Charlie, this movie series is going to feel my critical wrath. I mean, it sort of already has at this point, but you know what I mean. Charlie decides to drop by the Cullen crib to see the newborn, and is pretty weirded out by his daughter. I mean, I would be too. And this is where there's such a heartfelt conversation between Bella and Charlie in which he laments about losing her and the impact that will have upon him. And this is kind of what I mean about this entire franchise when I have said that Bella clearly doesn't care about how her choices affect the people around her, and to an extent doesn't care enough to involve or alert the people closest to her about what she's going through. Genuinely, Charlie deserves so much better, especially after all the love and care he's shown towards his daughter throughout this entire process. I know everyone always makes a fuss about the relationships Bella has with Edward and Jacob, which I guess are the eye candy duo of the franchise, but the parent-child connection between Charlie and Bella is really the heart and soul of this series and genuinely signifies the essential meaning of what love truly is. And that is something that is never replicated within the actual romantic relationships of the series, which is unfortunate. A few years pass and Renesmee is growing faster. Now she's played by Murph from Interstellar. Don't let me leave, Murph! However, there's an interesting angle at play here yet again. That's a recurring theme with this franchise, I guess. Remember that one vampire cult thing called the Volturi that was introduced back in New Moon? Well, they're back. Michael Sheen vampire dude gets word about Bella's special new baby and is sort of insulted that they never got a personal invite to see the newborn, which is why he and his companions decide to make a trip to see it for themselves. You see, they assume for some reason that Renesmee is something termed an immortal child, which is like this thing that it's a vampire that sucks the blood out of people uncontrollably because it transformed in childhood. It's never really explored in depth. Apparently, the Volturi don't like immortal children and they execute them, as well as anyone who has an immortal child in their possession, on the spot. And they want to do the same thing to Bella's new kid, which really doesn't sit right with her. I don't blame her for that. Gathering vampire forces from around the globe, the Cullens and Jacob prepare to fight as the Volturi's impending arrival grows closer. Alright, so we're building up to some good vampire on werewolf fighting action, huh? I'm in. Who we got fighting for the Cullens? We got, let's see. Is that Freddie Mercury? I also love Lee Pace and think he's incredibly underrated as an actor, so it's cool to see his inclusion in this film here. And now we are finally at the final battle. Oh boy, here we go. This is the moment I've been waiting for all franchise, basically, where shit is about to indeed go down between vampires and werewolves. Michael Sheen rolls up and can completely chews the scenery with ease. It's hard not to like him in his role. And then after he sees one of Alice's visions, he prepares to brawl and wait. They killed Carlisle? And yeah, I'm just going to say it. This final battle, insane stuff. If there's one thing to be said about this ending sequence, it's genuinely devastating in the way key characters are tossed aside as if they weren't built up for 4 movies prior. It feels like no one is legitimately safe, which is such an excellent choice for this conclusion and really heightens the intensity for anyone who's not familiar with the franchise like I am. And then, just as soon as it abruptly starts, it ends. Or should I say, it almost begins. Because the major insane plot twist here, and the thing that genuinely made me love this movie at the end of the day, is that the final battle never actually happened. Instead, it's what Michael Sheen's character saw through Alice's vision as what would happen. Holy shit. What an artistic choice. I genuinely have so much respect for Condon and the entire filmmaking team for going for this deliberate thematic choice. It further blurs the line between fiction and reality, never allowing audiences to orient themselves in either, and further complicating and straining the emotional connection we have to these characters in such a visceral way. And with that, Breaking Dawn Part 2 comes to a close. At its core, it's a film that delivers an emotionally resonant conclusion to this franchise, and it does the specific job quite well. The thing I respect the most about this film is how it portrays the emotional growth of all involved, especially the core trio of Bella, Edward, and Jacob. Their emotions seem more in check this time, they seem actually more mature, and the fact that all of them are finally working together to achieve a common goal is satisfying in and of itself. For the first time in this franchise, these characters aren't completely insufferable. In fact, I hate to admit it, I've almost started to grow fond of them. As the film and the saga in general come to a close, we get one last glance at the undead couple of Edward and Bella as they begin to contemplate an eternity together. And as the last final pages of the literal book close, I can't think of a more definitive or satisfying way to wrap up this storyline. And thus ends the Twilight saga. It's genuinely crazy to think that I started off today not knowing a thing about this franchise, and I just experienced a whirlwind of fantasy romance craziness in the span of a few short hours. That was an emotional roller coaster, to be sure. At first, I wasn't entirely sure if I liked the ride I was on, but as I progressed, I found that no matter if I could help it or not, I actually began to become more invested in the story and these characters, and appreciated the growth of not just themselves, but the narrative capacity of such a work as well. Okay, it's currently 12:05, it's past midnight, and I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed, I'm getting some sleep, and I'll pick up the camera again tomorrow morning to deliver my definitive analysis on the Twilight series overall. Alright guys, so I did it. I managed to watch all the Twilight films in 24 hours, and I'm here to sort of debrief on the entire situation now that I've had a little while to reflect on it. On first impressions overall, I was genuinely surprised to find that the series wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Granted, there were some definite low points, and some of the movies weren't as great as they could have been. But all jokes aside, to say that I wasn't ultimately intrigued and borderline entertained by this experience is an inaccurate statement. And on that level, I'm here to answer some of my questions I'd raised to myself as I started this whole challenge. In regards to my personal reaction to the series, I ultimately enjoyed my time with it overall. Granted, it gets ridiculous in portions. I was more than caught off guard by some overt artistic choices included here, and it's definitely not a series that aspires to be high art. But as a guilty pleasure, junk food-esque movie series, it manages to actually stand apart from most of its competition because of how it executes the source material. Not only did I enjoy many aspects of this franchise, but I also understand what the appeal is now. Going into this challenge, I was under the same mindset many other people in the pop culture space are about this series, which is that it's, quote, terrible fan fiction trash. And I mean it is, but as is the power of cinema, my viewpoint was broadened while watching the franchise, and while I can't say I ultimately walked away a fan of this series overall, I can at least recognize and understand why this series in general means so much to people everywhere. And I think that can be a really powerful thing within the space of cinema. In regards to my inquiry about whether I myself as a film critic could appreciate anything about this film from a thematic or cinematic standpoint, I actually found surprisingly a lot to admire. The direction in these movies isn't bad whatsoever. It's clear that no matter what the subject matter might be, talented people poured their hearts and souls into every second of these films in their runtimes. And their hard work and dedication more than pays off in so many instances. And it's clear that even in front of the camera, all the performers are trying to do their best with what they're given, which is especially apparent given their talent scope nowadays. Kristen Stewart is an incredible actress. Go watch Spencer if you haven't. It's an incredible movie that she was nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards for, and deserved to win for it, if you ask me personally. Robert Pattinson has continued to redefine himself inside of the indie and big budget filmmaking sphere with incredible performances in films such as Good Time, The Lighthouse, Tenet, and even as the new Batman as well. And Taylor Lautner, well, he plays a great comedic companion in Adam Sandler movies, I guess. And ultimately, to answer my last question, I was in fact able to eventually connect with core characters and ideas in this series. It might have taken a little bit longer than expected, but I eventually understood the arc of each character and can definitively look back and say that it tracks throughout some of the weirder moments in this series by far. All in all, this experience has taught me a valuable lesson that can be applied to all walks of life, even outside of film, which is never judge a book by its cover explicitly. In relation to my experience with Twilight, it was a series that I walked into expecting nothing particularly special, and while I can't say these movies aspire to be anything incredible cinematically, I can say that they hit the spot in terms of a fun, light, and carefree cinematic experience that doesn't require much out of its audience to work. The way I would compare it to is fine dining. Like sure, we all love and prefer a nice steak from a higher end establishment, but sometimes a burger from like a kick-ass local food stand or food truck just hits the spot. And that's sort of what this franchise does as its films progress. On this level, after this experience, I think it's safe to say that even if I'm not a fan of Twilight, I can say that I now respect and appreciate its status within the cinematic landscape. If this series is able to connect connect with you in a meaningful way, I think that's great and really showcases the incredible power of cinema to broach across all demographics and ways of life. So anyways, that was my experience watching every single Twilight movie in 24 hours. If you liked this video and want to see more of my normal movie review content, video essays, and reactions, don't forget to click the subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications so you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video to this channel. Also, leave a comment down below if you made it this far in the video, letting me know what your favorite Twilight film is or what your personal series ranking is. With that being said, thank you all so much for joining me on this journey, and I really appreciate every ounce of support I've gotten over the last few years on my channel. I really appreciate it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm about to move to Forks, Washington. I'll catch you on the flip side.